Fans of Marvel's X-Men have a lot to look forward to. While the Fox franchise featuring everyone's favorite mutants is slowly wrapping up, now that Marvel Studios and Disney have the rights for the superhero team, fans of the MCU have been theorizing how and who will end up entering the cinematic fray. While we figure we're a few years out from seeing X-Men characters return to the big screen and rub shoulders with some of our favorite heroes, we can't help but be curious. So today, rather than speculating who will be joining the MCU, we're going to debate about what characters might be left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, with our list of the top 10 X-Men too strong for the MCU. Essentially, we're looking at Omega-level mutants, and pondering the what-ifs behind what it would take for them to enter the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or what reasons producers would have for leaving them out for good. So with that in mind, let's jump in. And at number 10, ELIXIR. ELIXIR, aka Josh Foley, first appeared in 2003 in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 5. Funny enough, he was initially a member of an anti-mutant group called the Reavers, until his powers manifested and he's kicked out of the group, causing him to reluctantly join the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning after his parents also kick him out of his home. Speaking of his powers, ELIXIR is able to control the biological structure of any organic matter, which also includes his own body, as long as he is in proximity of his target. This means he can do things like heal others, restore and boost mutant powers, create painful and life-threatening ailments, like boils, welts, and even fatal tumors, cure the legacy virus, and even cause death. He can sense when people are sick or if there are any abnormalities in their body. He can also regenerate on a cellular level, and resurrect himself, meaning he is pretty much immortal. And at number 9, VULCAN. Initially introduced in 2006 in X-Men Deadly Genesis Issue 1, VULCAN, aka Gabriel Summers, is the younger brother of Cyclops and Havoc. While he's known more so for being a supervillain, the character once upon a time was part of the X-Men team. Energy is Vulcan's jam. He can psionically manipulate, transform, control, and absorb vast amounts of energy, including energy on the electromagnetic spectrum and from exotic sources, such as Cyclops' optic blasts, or even magically created energy. He can even tap into and suppress mutant energies if he'd like, and can produce light, heat, force, you name it. This also allows him to fly and survive in space. And at number 8, Kid Omega, aka Quentin Quire. Quentin Quire first appeared in New X-Men issue 134 back in 2003, joining the Xavier Institute. He quickly became one of Xavier's most favored students, with the professor attempting to help him control his powers. But Quentin takes a bit of a turn for the worse when he decides to start up the Omega Gang, a group of teenage mutants whose goal it was to exact revenge for the death of a famous mutant fashion designer. That, and he is super depressed about a girl not liking him back and the fact that he was adopted. Dude has fragile self-esteem. Anywho, what can he do? Well, he has advanced precognitive and telepathic abilities that not only allow him to think at immense speeds, but to manipulate the minds of others, resist mind probes, and he can psychically influence a large group of people at one time. He's even created an entire universe in his mind that he calls the Construct that he can imprison people within. Minus his previous gang shenanigans, Quentin generally acts in the interest of good, having recently been featured a member of the Fresh Start iteration of the West Coast Avengers. And at 7, MAGIK, aka Ileana Rasputina. MAGIK is the younger sister of Colossus, and first debuted in Giant Size X-Men issue 1 back in 1975. Now despite that, her character was merely a background character for the most part, and it wasn't until 8 years later that she was given a proper name in the Uncanny X-Men issue 160 in 1982, after aging 7 years in the paranormal dimension of Limbo, where she gained her mutant abilities. This includes interdimensional teleportation, magic manipulation, and the use of something called Soul Sword, which is something created by her own life force energy, a physical sword that with each use becomes more powerful. She can also manifest eldritch armor. During her time in Limbo, MAGIK became the sorceress supreme of that dimension, able to cast a plethora of spells using a mix of black magic and white magic, being taught the latter by an alternate universe version of Storm. She's also capable of creating powerful mind-blocking shields, keeping the likes of some of the strongest telepathic mutants out of her head, including Professor X. And at number 6, X-Man Nate Gray. Scott Summers and Jean Grey are responsible for some of the most powerful offspring in the mutant community, regardless of whether or not they actually intended to parent them. It's worth noting that Nate Gray is not Cable. Both characters are descendants of genetic material from Scott Summers and Jean Grey, but came to be in different manners, with Nate being grown in a laboratory in an alternate dimension thanks to Mr. Sinister, who used Scott and Jean's DNA to do so. Cable, on the other hand, is the son of Scott and Madeline Pryor, who is the clone of Jean Grey. Anywho, with that out of the way, let's talk about Nate. He has the ability to tap into the enormous psychic resources found in the astral plane, which allows him to manipulate matter and energy. His powers were diminished though by the Omega Machine. He's a character whose powers sometimes inflate and sometimes are taken away in the comics. He can also exist as living psychic energy, existing outside of his corporeal form. He was given his own solo series during Age of Apocalypse that briefly replaced Cable's series, and his series ended up running until 2001 as he was brought into to the Earth 616 continuity, with it ending with his seemingly sacrificial death after struggling for years with being the most powerful person in a reality in which he did not belong. How tragic. Speaking of Scott and Jean's offspring, in at number 5, Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers was created by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, first appearing in the Uncanny X-Men issue 141 back in 1981. But she didn't become Rachel Summers until after her debut, thanks to retcons. Gotta love a retcon. From an alternate future, she's the daughter of Cyclops and Jean Grey, the sister of Nate Grey, and a half-sister of Cable's. And she's hella strong. Not only has she had the Phoenix Force's abilities, she's also an empath, telepathic, telekinetic, and can astral project. She has limited time manipulation abilities too, and her telekinesis abilities can remotely manipulate matter, including on a subatomic level. And at number 4, Legion, aka David Haller. Legion, also known as David Charles Haller, is the son of Professor Charles Xavier. He traveled 20 years into the past in order to kill Magneto before his father's nemesis had the chance to amass power. But before he could, he ended up killing his father instead, which caused the Age of Apocalypse timeline to occur. Legion is often depicted as an anti-hero, and is known for his severe dissociative identity disorder, which formed after his mutant powers manifested during a terrorist attack in which he ended up absorbing the mind of the terrorist leader into his own. Because of his trauma, parts of David's personality splinter, each controlling a different aspect of his powers. Speaking of powers, why is he so strong aside from his parentage? Well, he can reality warp, he can shapeshift, he can manipulate matter, and is capable of transmutation. He can manipulate energy, he's telepathic, telekinetic, he can teleport, and of course, he can time travel. But because of his severe dissociative identity disorder in later story arcs, he's often sedated or hospitalized. Reed Richards, Madison Jeffries, and Dr. Nemesis would later create something called a neutral switchboard wristband that would help him control his multiple personalities and better manage his powers. And in X-Men Legacy, he ended up erasing himself from existence altogether, but even that didn't fully work out for him. Poor Legion. And at number 3, Hope Summers. Hope Summers first appeared in X-Men issue 205 in 2007 as part of the X-Men Messiah Complex storyline. After Decimation, a story event in which Scarlet Witch used her powers to turn all of the mutants into regular depowered humans, Hope was the first mutant to be born, which starts a hunt for the character. She's saved by Cable, who names her after her adopted mother who looked after the child with him, and Summers technically being Cable's last name. Hope is a vessel of the Phoenix Force, and has unspecified limits when it comes to physically manipulating and mimicking the powers of other mutants. So yeah, in the scope of things, that could be super deadly later on down the line when mutant characters have been established in the MCU. Hope's mimicry abilities allow her to use those mutant powers at their utmost capacity, but because of this, she is potentially incredibly dangerous to people and the environment around her due to the massive amounts of power levels that she generates. Talk about a walking bomb. And at number 2, Jean Grey. Let's be honest here, Jean Grey is 100% going to be added to the MCU. It's almost inevitable. But the chances that we'll be seeing the Phoenix Force flexing its OP-ness on the big screen are pretty slim, at least for now. If anything, since the Phoenix Force is a major part of the X-Men stories, we think that if Jean does become the Phoenix, it'll be an event that's built up over time in the MCU, similar to what was done with the Infinity Gauntlet story arc. So really, Jean's Phoenix is just too strong for the MCU right now, but who knows what the future will hold. Regardless, she is OP as hell. And finally, in at number 1, Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards is the son of Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards and Invisible Woman Sue Storm. And he's one incredibly powerful kid, that's for damn sure. First introduced in 1968 in Fantastic Four Annual Issue 6, Franklin is way beyond an Omega level mutant, having vast reality manipulating powers along with psionic powers. This means he can manipulate matter and energy on a cosmic scale, project energy, is capable of telekinesis, telepathy, astral projection, and precognition. He can teleport, and these two things are great, he's immortal, and can create pocket universes. The kid can create his own damn universes. Celestials consider him to be on par with them, and his powers only increase the older he gets. So yeah, I'm sure we'd all love to see what Marvel Studios would do with a character like that. And to be fair, we're sure Franklin Richards is far from being up on the silver screen. The MCU still needs to establish his parents first. And some people have theorized that that won't happen until after Phase 5, so long way to go, friends. Long way to go. What other mutants can you think of that would be difficult to adapt into the MCU? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know. If you dug this video, spread the love, hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for more videos just like this. But in the meantime, I will catch you guys later. Thanks for watching.